Right, well, welcome to a solo show. I'm actually walking on the South Downs in the UK, and I've been sort of pondering something that's come to me in various forms of late. About the sort of certainty of what we believe in and what we think, and sort of questioning our own assumptions about stuff and what that can do for us creatively. This has been brought about by a friend of mine who's always sort of prided themselves on being good at being able to predict things. And what's interesting in this is that I know them well enough to, and over a number of years, to realise how inaccurate they are about what they think. And yet they hold true to this fact that they go on their feelings and that they're very accurate. Now, from the sort of psychical research perspective of things, if you're 60% accurate, or even 55% accurate, there's something going on there, because that's more than chance. But of course, it also means that you're 45% wrong, even if you're gifted. Now, in my sort of way of thinking, that's a good tool to have to give you an insight into things, but you shouldn't depend upon it, obviously. It should be just one of the things in your toolkit. You could sort of sit down and reason things out and still be wrong. So that's just another tool in the kit. So when it comes into things like creative thinking, that ability to foresee something is actually really interesting, particularly if you're writing books or writing songs. And therefore you get certain people that have that ability to write stories that are extraordinary in their sort of presence. Alan Moore is one that sticks out, and that particularly V for Vendetta, where there's a lot of things that he sort of predicts ahead of time. I accidentally pressed the stop button instead of the pause. It just shows how good I am at camera work. So I was saying about this ability to predict, and so there was this thing going on about that. Somebody who had this certainty of what they felt was correct, and being completely inaccurate. But there was also something that I came across as a podcast, which was brilliant. Obviously, because I've been podcasting for about 5 years now. When a good podcast comes along, because they've got an interesting angle or the format's good, I sort of get inspired by that. This particular podcast was called the Witch Trials, of J.K. Rowling, and it's sort of headed up by this woman called Megan. Now I can't remember the exact name now. Forbes Roper, I think her name is. Phelps Roper, that's right. And this lady had been part of the Westboro Baptist Church in America that were very vociferous in their sort of attacks on people, gays and all the rest of it. And she basically said that, she grew up in this environment and she was so sure of the belief that they were right. Later in the programme, because there's about 7 episodes of this, they talk about the witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts, very famous historical thing. Hello. And they were sort of saying that they were saying that the people involved in this event, there were about 200 people accused of witchcraft, and people would, accusing one another, basically. She was saying that this particular community, which were all Puritans, they were virtually all literate. They were one of the highest rates of literacy in America, and a lot of these people had studied law. So it's completely the opposite of what we'd expect. That we got a load of people who were just superstitious and sort of backward. And these people were sort of swept up in the legalities of this situation. And they were obviously all convinced that they were correct. So in this series of programs where it started off by the host of the show writing a letter to J.K. Rowling, who's obviously been cancelled, if you like, by her sort of stand as a feminist against some of the changes that are going on, particularly in the UK, where you can just make a statement that you're whatever you are, you can say that you're a woman, and that's it. That's the legal thing. And her standpoint was that, this doesn't leave safe places for young girls and women when somebody can just say that they've just decided to become, a female. And of course, what's become sort of clear in this is that a lot of people get the wrong end of the stick, if you like. They don't actually listen to the complete argument that she's making. Hello. And so people jump to conclusions. But again, as it gets deeper and deeper into the arguments on both sides, she interviews some people who are trans people, and then some of their arguments become really interesting. That they have actually got this sort of point that is not necessarily what's on the surface, but what sits underneath. And particularly for Americans, So obviously this thing is about free speech anyway. But the last episode in this is called But What If You're Wrong? And it's this idea of your beliefs needing to be challenged. So what fascinated me about this is the depth of the program, the sort of multi-layered nature of it. Whereas on the surface it's just about what on earth was J.K. Rowling doing, coming up and making statements about trans people. But of course she wasn't actually saying that. And then what is the kickback? And what's that based in? And then you see that there's this other layer of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have considered on that surface matter. And then feeding back into that is the human capacity or reaction to do, which is literally a witch hunt. And not just with J.K. Rowling, but a witch hunt with people that are different. And so that's the historical thing of the Salem witch hunt, which is fascinating because apparently there were lots of people accused of witchcraft, but actually not many people, even though there were a lot of people burnt and all the rest of it, there was only a small percentage of people convicted. So there are lots of things that we assume which actually aren't what happened. So we have to also be very careful not to back project things, which obviously we do, on the past based on our own assumptions in this modern day. And you see it all the time, don't you, with historical figures being sort of, cancelled, if you like, because how horrible they are, but they're completely taken out of context of the time. Okay, we might not like the things that were going on based on that sort of time, but we're living in a different period of time, and surely people are going to look back and think, what on earth are these idiots doing back in the 21st century at the beginning, So this thing of looking at what if I'm wrong. So we should do that musically, or creatively. Obviously I refer to things musically because that's my focal point for most of the time. But as soon as you start to enter that sort of thing of the space of not really knowing, lots of different things come out creatively. You think of things differently. You become much more observant of stuff. If you just generally act that you don't know, or that you are wrong. What if I'm wrong? What do you start to see? And I can really vibe with the fact that as soon as you step back and look at things with a different eye, you notice a whole bunch of things that have been going on all the time that you were completely unaware of because you blindside yourself. So going back to this sort of certainty that people have, I think it's actually very difficult for people to accept that they could be wrong. Because when people do this, they always start to caveat things with sort of yes, but, or which brings me into another little thing, which is this sort of Livingstone thing from the improv books on drama, of the yes and in improvisation. When people say something to you, you agree with them but the caveats always tend to be no but, or yes but. But yes and is an interesting point because it doesn't shut down the conversation. Now that can be very difficult to do because we're sort of wired up not to do that. We're wired up also to do the Orwell thing of group speak. Just go with what the crowd are saying. And it's very challenging to do that, to think outside the box and think differently and challenge your own beliefs. So let's have a look where we are. Just basically fields of white stuff. Cow parsley, dandelion head clocks in a field. This is obviously, this is owned by the English Heritage, I think, or the National Trust. I think it's National Trust. Slindon is a Sussex village. Didn't realise there's electric fence. Slindon was bought by the National Trust as a working Sussex village, and it's been kept. I think it was bought back in the 1920s, so it's been owned by the National Trust for a long time. And if you walk actually through the village, it's a stunning place, and lots of it is, a lot of the actual buildings, houses, are actually still owned by the trust. There's a few there I think actually must be owned privately, but the idea is to keep that. So you realise it was that sort of way of living was going into decline for a long time, for the trust to actually buy. Well, actually, I think it was donated by somebody who obviously could see, metaphorically, the writing on the wall for that type of that sort of place, which they would have looked upon as being part of the tradition of English villages. So a working village. Anyway, consider what you believe in. What happens if you're wrong? Just sort of ponder that a little bit. I've got this this book due to come out very soon. I'm just, I've got a launch date, but I haven't got a date for the printing. So putting my it's always good to have a deadline, isn't it? Awesome. So until next time, see you then.